Come with us on a journey into the unknown, the unexplained, and the unbelievable. We will test your senses and challenge your beliefs. A world where science and religion clash. Or do they? You will meet real people and hear real stories, but you will not believe. You will witness strange sights and hear strange sounds, but you will not believe. This is the New England Ghost Project. Welcome to the nightmare.
Well, April Fool, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ghost Chronicles Next Generation. I am Ron Kolek, and this is my new super cool Ghostbuster mug.
All right.
And with me, of course, is the blonde Bombshell herself, Anne Kerrigan.
That's it. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the lovely introduction. Well, welcome everybody to Ghost Chronicles Next Generation number 40.
40.
Number 40. I know. It's getting a little long in the tooth. Yes, we're still here, whether you want us or not.
40 years. 40 years.
40 years. It's like a jail sentence, huh?
Yeah. When Steve Parsons came over to the UK, we used to sit on the front porch at the beach. And this little old lady would come across the street and tell us the same stories all the time. She'd always say, I've been here for 40 years. 40 years.
Wow.
So that was our saying for the longest time. 40 years.
At the beach? That's not a bad gig.
No, it isn't really.
I don't think so.
That was fun. We'll be back there this fall, by the way,
yes,
for Spirit Quest. Steve Parsons will be here. He'll be doing the show. And it's going to be great. So anyway, speaking about people from that other country.
Yes.
You know, the one we liberated. The one that left Brixnix, whatever it is, Bredswilks, I can never say it.
Brexit?
Yeah, that too.
That's it. Let's not get into that, no.
Okay.
But would you like to introduce our guest?
Yes.
We're going to dive right in tonight.
Yes, we are diving right in because we've got an action-packed show.
Yes, we do.
This is a young gentleman I had the opportunity to meet at one of my red light seances, which I run monthly. And he is here all the way from the UK, who is now part of our lovely American country. And without further ado, let me introduce to you Spiritualist Medium, Mark Brittle.
Thank you, Ron. Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome.
And thank you, Anne. Great pleasure to be here. And yes, going back to what you were saying, I suppose the States was a bit too hot to handle, so we had to let you go.
It always sounds like Parsons. Yeah, Steve always tells us that. Yeah, we liberate, let you go. Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, so you were born in the UK, right?
I was indeed.
In England, I guess.
England,
right.
Yes, that's right. Fairly near London, where I spent my childhood. And then I went to college in the West Country and then went to college further in London and stayed in London for quite a while. And then lately moved down to the south coast, which is about 50 miles dead south of London. And and a couple of years ago, I came here to join my lovely wife, Karen.
Now, there's a neat story on how you met Karen, right?
There is. We actually met at the splendid building, which I think is right behind me now, shown on the screen. Affectionately known by students as Hogwarts, but otherwise known as the Arthur Findlay College for Spiritual Studies. And we met there some years ago. And so we had some common ground. And since that time, we've always tried to further our joint interest in matters spiritual, by which I mean really communicating with the next step of life, and with all its various ramifications.
So you are a spiritualist, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, that's a would you say it's a religion?
No, I mean it is a religion, but from my point of view, it's not a religion.
Okay.
See, having, which I do, a scientific background, I think it's
What
really...
is your scientific background?
Oh, well, I'm a biologist by training.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I was in cancer research for quite some years.
Oh, wow.
Which I put aside for other things. But I regard much of what's said to be spiritualism as simply offering a fuller understanding, still highly incomplete, but a fuller understanding of nature and the world around us. And in fact, when I was a scientist, I was always very uncomfortable with not that I particularly understood them as a biologist, but I was very uncomfortable with the more high-flown schemes of creation and particularly the generation of life. I didn't buy it. And because I was working quite close with research, I thought, well, I do have a somewhat valid opinion as to whether or not I think all this stuff fits together. And I never did think it did. But nature, as spiritualists will tell you, and many other people, and this is not just spiritualists, because much of the spiritualist canon is derived from Eastern studies, obviously, and so forth. But what we see is just a part of a huge nature that goes on to other planes or dimensions, if you like. Rather difficult to define, but nevertheless, I'm certain it's there. So, yeah, from that point of view, I don't think spiritualism needs to be a religion. But when it was sort of reinvented here in the States, or rediscovered, because obviously spiritualism goes back in cultural history for thousands of years.
Oh, we thought we invented it here in the States.
You did in modern
Fox
terms. You did the Fox
sisters,
sisters, absolutely. That's what brought it to.
Like, yeah.
That's what brought it to the light of modern, to the notice of modern man. When it was first discovered, there was almost the necessary cover for it to be a religion, because it attracted a lot of persecution. And it still does. It still does and still can. But if it's seen as a more general understanding, as I mentioned, more of a philosophy of life, then it doesn't really have to be a religion. But it's organised in terms of churches, which is a convenient way of organising it, as a sort of church would be a convenient way of organising almost any group with a certain interest, a certain pointed interest, which isn't shared by everyone.
When you think about it, churches are basically clubs.
Yes.
Religion is a club.
Yes.
You have the
Kind
same no, you have the same views.
Yeah.
You meet with the same
You
people.
do.
With the
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, so
And spiritual churches in particular are highly independent. They can spring up where they want, and they're only very loosely controlled, very loosely. So yes, from that point of view, they're about as near to a club as you could reasonably get.
and you can get a spiritualist degree for like $25 off.
Are they as much as that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So can we back up to Arthur Findlay for a moment, because not everybody
beep, beep,
knows
beep, beep.
exactly what Arthur Findlay is and what they do there. And maybe could you just explain a little bit for our audience?
I mean, Arthur Findlay was a great proponent and protagonist of mediumship, and he lived, I think he lived roughly from about 1880 to 1950 or something like that. Those are about his dates. And he wasn't a medium himself, but he was utterly convinced of the value of spiritualism, and he was a very learned man, and in between doing his day job as a very successful accountant and businessman, and he made a lot of money, and he bought the hall, which is behind, and had it as a country house. In between making all that money and living the life of royalty, he was also incredibly encouraging about spiritualist matters, and wrote a lot of books concerning cultural history, which includes spiritualism, but goes long behind that, other than that. I mean, his works occupy a shelf about that thick. I mean, he was very, very prolific. And he bequeathed his home and its contents and what necessary endowments there were to spiritualism on his passing, which I believe was about 50 years ago, something like that, maybe a bit more than that. And so it's called the Arthur Findlay College by spiritualists because it is Arthur Findlay's gift to spiritualism. And it's a magnificent mansion. It's pretty well untouched apart from a few sort of conveniences. It's got lots of bedrooms, and when it's full, it holds courses for, I think it holds about 200 students at once. And it makes residential courses, and really all the world's finest mediums go there as tutors. And it's not an expensive place. And the tutors themselves, who are at the top of their game and can obviously earn quite a reasonable living, to say the least of it, they do this sort of stuff almost free.
Wow.
The fees are all minimal. and so it's a very much in itself a sort of charitable operation. And it's most wonderful. And you can go there, and it's a sort of total immersion sort of place where you go and you have tuition in classes about 12 hours a day. And it's a marvellous place. And you very rarely hear a bad word said about it. And a lot of people live for the place. You know.
So
That's
what type
amazing.
of classes do they offer?
Nice.
Well, as you can imagine, it's mostly mediumship classes, but it offers, I wouldn't say something for everyone, but you can go on classes which are sort of people who have been in practice as mediums for a long while, where a beginner would be probably a bit at sea in it. Or you can go for classes where it's a more step-by-step thing, because there are obviously things like psychic aspects to mediumship which have to be discussed. And so yes, it's pretty mainstream mediumship. Occasionally they dart out a bit. I think they were offering a science course at one stage, a science and mediumship course. But the grandees in the institution and the people who are tutors there are basically important career mediums, and what they're offering their wealth of experience.
And not all the classes deal with mental mediumship, but there's also physical mediumship
Yes,
as well.
yes, there are demonstrations of trance and so forth, but of course that's there are. Yeah.
Yeah, I know quite a few people that have gone there. It seems to be quite the vogue thing from the United States to go over there and study at Arthur Findlay.
Yeah, I mean,
That
it
sounds
doesn't.
pretty amazing.
The place doesn't really have any competitors anywhere else, really.
Sure.
Not really. And there are residential courses at Omega, but often the people who are organising the courses there are the very same that you find in the Arthur Findlay College. And the level of immersion might be slightly different. But it has been around a long while now, the Arthur Findlay College, and it's got a pretty unassailable position as being what it is. You know, it's a choice of one. That's it.
That's
So
awesome.
you met your wife there, or
We
was
did.
it like, she was levitating and you just happened to notice
That's right.
her?
Well, she was stuck in the branches of a tree, and I had to pull her up by the leg.
No, how did you meet your wife? That's we like to touch on the personal side
yeah,
too a
right.
little bit.
yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
And her foot didn't take long to get better at all, really. So, yeah.
Did you meet her in class, seriously?
Yeah.
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 So I mean,
Sure, why not?
who attracted to who first?
Well, I hope it was mutual.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And of course, well, I don't know. Maybe you some spirit told you, "Hey, this woman likes you."
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
you
there
should
might
talk to
have
her.
been
Give it a
somebody
little
that.
poke.
Yeah.
I don't think either of us went there expecting to get married out of it.
Right.
Well, you know,
Right.
yeah.
Especially somebody from the States. I mean, Jesus.
That's no disadvantage these days.
So anyway, you've also got involved in an orb project.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about that, or?
Yeah, I mean, really these orbs. Now, what are they? We've got some photographs to show, which
Absolutely.
you kindly allow me to bring along, and they're something which many people must have seen in photographs that they take, and there happens to be the strength of it I don't know, but there happens to be an association of orbs with spiritual endeavours. There's usually an association of orbs in a broader sense with things which are sort of emotively charged. So very often they'll come up with pictures where you have parties where people are enjoying themselves. And very often they'll come up in things which have a sort of depth of feeling to them, like historic places or spooky places, come to that.
Right.
And so there's a little bit written on them, and because it turned out that they are very easy to capture on a camera.
Oh, sure.
That's not to say you can always get them, but they're easy enough to do. Anyone can do it. And so I was amassing lots of pictures of orbs, and then I put together a sort of
as a
wish list.
scientific background,
Yeah.
you know that orbs can be caused by dust particles, water vapor.
Well,
and
I
so
don't know
forth
whether
and
they
so on.
can, because I
Really?
don't think that's consistent with. There's certainly a relationship between these water saturation and orbs. They're certainly much more easy to picture if you've got fairly saturated air. There's no doubt about that. But because they can be seen in real time by infrared vision cameras
Right.
and filmed, it's quite clear that their behaviour would be very difficult to explain in terms of dust balls. I mean, they generally have a certain well-defined structure, and they have movement and almost an independent movement. I think it is an independent movement, and a rapidity of movement, and a pattern of behaviour in their ability to literally penetrate walls and come out the other side, which is incredibly difficult to put together under any hypothesis which says that they're dust balls.
Right, exactly.
But what they are, I don't know. I mean, they may well be. I don't want to do modern orthodox science down, but they may be more or less overlooked by orthodox science, because if you just saw one or two on a film, on a picture that is, not a film, on a film, you could easily dismiss them as being some sort of aberration of the lens, and I think most people do. So, I mean, can we have a look at these?
Yeah,
pictures?
why don't we do that? I was just going to say that. Yeah.
If we can start with the first one. What's it? We'll start with the first
Number one. Yep. There we go.
There you go.
Oh, no. Now, this is a picture which I didn't even take. This was taken at Disney World in Paris. You can tell it's at Paris because people have got coats on. And this is the sort of orb that appears, and I think there must be millions of these across the globe where people see a picture like that and they get something which looks, just with that one, looks like an aberration in the film. And it's like a pallid moon, and that's the sort of thing which there are lots of. And so that's a situation where it's a sort of fairly joyous occasion. And then another way, they just creep up in normal everyday snaps. If we could have the next photograph.
Number two, please. There you go.
And this is I hope you can see it on the screen. This is a photograph that's given to me of an old car, but that photograph of that car is absolutely peppered with orbs. And if you were to look at it close to, you will see there are all sorts of orbs of different shapes and sizes, and that's just a straightforward snap that someone took of that old car.
Okay.
And so I think often people would find, if they looked at their pictures, orbs where they weren't particularly wanting them, they didn't expect them, and they might just. But you can go on from there, because you can find that they can be slightly more amenable to photography, and I'll get onto that. Yeah, that's it. That next one, that's a picture of a group of people, including myself, in a church actually. That was just taken at the occasion of some little church, finger food thing. And there's a big orb between me and the next chap, just on there.
Right.
So then I thought, well, the thing to do then is to purposely try and go out and find some and see whether they can be put through their paces in any way. You see, still not knowing what they are, except that they can appear. So I don't know what. So we got the. What would be the next there? Now there's a situation. Now this was taken in a castle under very damp conditions, and there you see what looks like a lot of mist, which it probably is. But you can also see in there lots of structures, and these orbs in these positions have. You can see they've got a net-like outer layer.
Okay.
They've got like a sort of cortex of a net-like pattern, and depending upon how clearly they come out, that's more or less. Now, one of the things about that, seeing that photograph there, you might say, well, okay, if it's not an aberration, if it is something, where is that? Where is that body, that orb? Because there's no way of telling from any photograph like that how far the orb is from the lens. That's okay, you can keep that one on.
Okay.
How far the orb is from the lens. Now, you could get around that possibly if you could have a stereoscopic camera
Right.
to do it, which I haven't had available. But you can also do it if you take pictures of orbs in woodland or in rooms crowded with furniture, because there you can quite clearly occasionally see that an orb might be in front of one thing and behind another. So you can see, and sometimes you can get the plane of the orb absolutely spot on, so you know that it's behind this and in front of that, by depending. And so, but much of the time you really don't know how big they. Now here's a bit of ghost hunting that we did some time ago, and what better than a churchyard?
Of course.
Yeah.
So now when and I hope people go and do this. Much of these pictures were taken with a Nokia phone, which was the best I've ever had for doing it. An iPhone can work, but I mean there are certain rules that you can give about what's the best sort of camera to use. And so most of the time you go snapping around, you get absolutely nothing.
Right.
And then you might find you suddenly get a really fine picture, and then the next picture be nothing again. So you can take, say, with digital cameras, you could quite easily take 50 photographs, snap, 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 something like that,
Right.
and then suddenly you'll get one, and then you'll get nothing. And sometimes, but that one, I hope that comes out on the screen, but that's a particularly nice one. It's got a very good pattern in it, that one,
Okay.
which you sometimes don't see. Now,
The screen that's people's television is a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Than that. That's just
It's a little
that's just a
squishier.
monitor
yeah,
screen.
that,
so,
that should that
okay.
should be okay. But that's a particularly clear one. And on that evening, several were available like that, and so that led us really to consideration of some other things. One of them is whether or not these things move about or not, these orbs, because yes, you take a picture and there's not one, and then you take a picture and there is one. And in fact, you can see them. I used to like doing if you use a night vision viewer, an infrared viewer. You can use a night vision camera as well, but a viewer is. And when you see these things, which is not unusual, they're never stationary. They move. And I think about the slowest speed at which they move, just about the slowest speed, they'd traverse a room in about half a second. So that's about 30 miles an hour for the slowest. So they really do fly.
Speedy.
They fly like birds, like a fast bird flying around. And under certain conditions, you can see loads of them at once flying around. And then you have to say, well, wasn't I lucky to take the photograph and have that orb in that place just when the photograph was taken, when the shutter was pressed? Because if you were looking at them in real time, or even with a movie camera, you'd see that they actually shoot past like little rockets.
Right.
So I don't know whether it's surprising that any are capturable on a still camera, simply because they move so quickly. It'd be like having a room full of birds and just keep taking photographs until one comes out.
Do we want to do the next photo?
We
or-
can go to the next one.
Okay.
Now, here's a photograph, because now this is the best one of that sort that I know of. It's me again, I'm afraid. You have to put up with that, I'm afraid. And again, I don't know. I'm not offering any evidence that these orbs have anything to do with spiritualism, of course.
Well,
other
that's
than the
what
fact that
I was going to ask you. I was waiting until you were finished, but
Yeah.
I wanted to know what you thought these orbs were.
No,
So
well,
just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I'll keep it in mind. Well, some way towards it is just that they appear to be somewhat biddable. So, if you want to photograph orbs, if you want to get a photograph of them, it does seem that if you ask for them, you might get them. That probably helps. And there is this has more or less been repeated. If you want to ask for an orb to go to a certain place, then you might be lucky, and they might. And that one was done just for that purpose.
Really?
There
That's
I'm sort of,
right practically
I've
in
got
your
a sort
hands.
of pained look on my face where I'm sort of trying to connect with the greater world. And the answer was this terrific picture of an orb nesting right at the ends of my fingers. There's another phenomenon coming up here, which is associated with it.
There we go.
I know, we could leave that one on. But sometimes, at the same time as orbs, there is a distortion of space, and that can particularly affect people's countenances and people's bodies. We have a wonderful picture of my wife taken in that same churchyard which you saw just now, and I can't remember whether there's an orb in that shot or not, but her fingers are tremendously elongated according to the camera, and they're really not that long in life, you know. Her nails really aren't that close, not that long in life. And other times there are very curious facial distortions, and in the picture which you saw just a moment ago, which is on my hand, I appear to have acquired a couple more fingers. And it's a very interesting effect.
Wow.
And sometimes I think the effect is mostly to be seen on bodies, people's bodies. But sometimes it can affect things around them as well. You can get a very curious distortion.
Wow.
So is this similar to, like, if you either scry and sometimes you get distortions in the mirror where you...
I think it must be.
Or even for instance, in physical mediumship where there's a transfiguration.
Yes, yes. You see, the transfiguration may be a visible to the onlooker example of what, in this case, is only seen by the camera. Because one of the things I didn't quite mention is that usually these orbs are not seen by eye. They're picked up in the camera. But that is because they exist in the infrared. Now, you'll know this very well, Ron, but it is the case that if you use infrared filtration, you don't get pictures of orbs. And ghost hunters now, because infrared filtration is sometimes an inbuilt feature of cameras, they'll actually modify the cameras by taking out the filtration. But what you need is an incident light containing infrared, so any flashlight will do. And then the reflection is infrared, so we can't see it and the camera can. And that's why they're visible by night vision cameras. And it's quite a simple hypothesis. It's probably one of the few things that does work most of the time. They're in infrared, so you don't see them. But it is the case that they can sometimes be visible. They can sometimes be visible in daylight anyway, and I know this because I've seen one. And in fact, I saw one exactly outside the Arthur Findlay College with two other people as well. We were sort of just aghast at this. It was sort of late in the afternoon, not dark, but the sun was setting a little bit. And we saw a huge orb, about that big. It was right in front of us. And it was like, I don't know, it must be like if people, well, it was just something completely unworldly we saw, otherworldly. And so they can, and occasionally you can, if your eye is away from just looking in the camera, occasionally at the point when the flash goes off, you can see something which is an orb, as it were, as if it's reflecting a bit of visible light back. So that sounds very vague. Well, it is vague, but the rule is not hard and fast, but usually you absolutely cannot see these things, although they appear as the brightest of white here in the camera. So there could be a lot to be done in terms of looking at more advanced forms of photography.
Okay, go ahead.
I think we have a question from our chat room.
Which you can't see
I know, I
because
just have
of
to nudge
reflection.
up a little bit here. Mark, what do you think orbs are composed of, and do different colored ones have different properties?
That's from Stephen Scott, who is a spiritualist medium from Scotland. By the way. Yeah.
Yes.
Hello, Stephen
Thank you,
Scott.
Stephen.
Thank you for your inquiry. What are they? I don't know. I honestly have no idea. From a spiritualist, I'd take the point of view that they were objects somehow coming through the dimensions. Not a very helpful answer, I'm afraid, but I really don't understand what they are. They have a definite, some of them can have a definite reticular structure, there's no doubt about that. And the other thing is that they can absolutely penetrate anything. I've photographed them coming through cave walls and going out through the roof of a cave with no discernible difference in their velocity. As for colours, it is the case that sometimes I've found orbs of slightly different hues, pinkish and bluish and white, but I haven't really, there might be significance to that and I haven't thought of it. It's an interesting concept, but there might be some.
Okay.
But I'd be interested to hear what the questioner's view on this is, because my mind is unclear on it.
Okay.
Now, we are running a little bit on time, right?
Yeah, I mean, do we want to
So,
continue, or we
yeah,
can,
I
we
do-
don't have to go with the
yeah,
cemetery trip?
yes, but I do want to mention that we had a unique experience together at my red light seances. And so I guess the best way is I conduct these red light seances once a month up in Vesey. And Mark and his wife attended one, actually a couple. And so first of all, I want to know why you chose to attend it. I think that's an interesting.
We chose to attend it because I think it's a rare opportunity of people doing grassroots things like sitting around a table and basically working for spiritual effects. I mean, when you read the books, you find in the old days people sat in circles for years to get effects. And it is the case that people expect and want effects within one or two goes now. There isn't that sort of, well, there clearly isn't that sort of devotion to duty that there might have been in yesteryear.
Exactly.
Well, there was no TV for a start, so you couldn't watch it on TV. So when we saw what you were doing, we came along and we were astounded by the results. Karen and I were both absolutely astounded.
Thank you.
And the movement you get. Have you seen this, Anne? This table seance?
Red light seance.
Yeah, I've done that with Ron at Spirit Quest.
I mean,
before.
the movement of the table is
Yes.
quite awesome.
It's crazy.
It really is. This is a huge table, isn't it? It must weigh, I don't know, a couple of hundredweight easily with the 8 people around it.
Yeah, it's enormous.
And the night we came along, I've known similar sorts of exercises done once or twice at the Arthur Findlay College. And sometimes, as it was indeed in the night that we came, we were lucky enough, sometimes it's possible to get fairly specific information about a spirit person, absolutely coincidental with the table tilting. And of course, for a very long time, the table tilting itself has been used as a sort of means of communication with table wraps and so forth. And I know you don't always use it in that way, but is definitely a very strong association between spiritual activity and a table movement. And but the ghost light effect that we had that night was really
so
quite
let's bring up
stunning.
the picture of the light. So let's describe this light. Can we bring up the picture, please? Simple circuit, I think it's called. It's the last picture on there. There we go.
There you go.
So this is very simple. This is spirit light. Steve Parsons brought one over to me from the UK. It's basically a battery, a power source, a wire going to a light bulb, the end of the wire going to the switch, going to the battery. So when you complete the circuit, the light goes on. When you turn the switch on, it goes on. When you turn it off, it's very simple, very simple thing. And we had it on the table that night.
We did,
And
for
I'll let you
all to
continue.
see. For all to see. And we had a spirit person in who happened to be a science teacher in the previous life, which was most interesting. And just about coincidental with that, this light began to work. Now, this means that the battery voltage to complete the circuit, which was say a 1.5 volt battery or a 9 volt battery or something, but to complete the 9 volt battery, to complete the circuit, the current in conventional terms would have to have jumped across about 1/8 of an inch of open space, which represented the space between the contacts of the open switch. And the light went on, and it stayed on. And as if it wasn't enough that the circuit was actually ostensibly completed, in almost no time at all, after 2 or 3 minutes, the battery went flat. Now, that's another interesting, which we can get into that in a minute, it's another interesting finding, because that's also consistent with other effects which I'm sure you observe, Ron, and I certainly have. But the way in which that could have been accomplished is very difficult to surmise. I mean, if under normal conditions to bridge a gap of 1/8 of an inch, you'd need 30,000 volts an inch, so 1/8, 4. You need say 5 kilovolts or something to arc across, which is not going to be forthcoming from a 9 volt battery, and you'd see a spark. Either that, or you have to turn the airspace in the contacts to some sort of plasma, some sort of ionic, that's what you'd have to do.
Exactly.
And there's no other way, really, hardly any other way of doing it. Although maybe a physicist would be handy for this, to really, someone who really knew. But it's tantamount impossible to imagine how this could work. And along the lines of suggesting something which could be at the root of it, and this was a marvellous effect. And actually, I must say this an aside, when we got home, I immediately made one of those things to try to get. We've had no success in getting it working, but I wouldn't even expect to get it working. It's such a tall order. I mean, it's almost as like saying, "Well, move that cup from there to there." I mean, it's that. But there are a couple of things about this. Firstly, as we know, spiritual communication can often involve the tweaking or meddling with electronic equipment.
Right.
That's a slightly different order from actually bridging a gap in an open circuit, but nevertheless there's tweaking. Secondly, we know that the instruments that electricians often use for sounding out live wires in walls, EMF meters, they are very frequently used by ghostbusters. It's a usual way, and Ron, you have them working at your seances as well. These are things which would normally only pick up a live wire, so they need quite a big electromotive force to be tweaked into life. And these things can chirp like birds, handheld in midair, when there's spiritual activity. In fact, I've known people conduct a conversation with spirits using mirror deflections, and I'm sure you have too.
Yep.
Now, so there is this ability to induce EMF, which would otherwise correspond to really seriously high current circuit loads. That still doesn't explain why the light comes on, but it gives it's all in that realm, because we're dealing with things which we don't understand. We can know that they're there, but we just really don't understand. And secondly, the battery running down. This again is something, and I've had first-hand experience of this, and I'm sure you have, that you can load a battery into some device and find that it absolutely fails. And I've actually had, even taking batteries out, which most people do when they're ghostbusting, they take their EMF meter or their temperature meter, which is another thing that can change, and they have a whole pack of batteries ready to put in. And if the night's going really well, then you drain every single battery, 0 seconds flat, and you don't get any readings because the batteries go flat in a minute. So this was a big battery on this light that you had. Took quite. I mean, that would be enough to light the light for hours, probably, ordinarily.
9 volt would be for a while.
And it went down in about 4 minutes, something like that.
Wow.
3 or
And
4
we
minutes.
did ask the spirit to turn the light off. I says, they turned it on. Can you turn the light off for us? And it didn't go off immediately like it turned on, but it did it in this draining effect
Drained it
going down.
Yeah.
as the spirit left. So it was
Quite
an
remarkable.
interesting.
It was remarkable.
I have to tell you a funny story.
Yeah.
When a few years back, it's got to be maybe 10 years now, we had a German television crew came over, was doing a documentary on me and my team, and they came over here, and we were telling them about what we do and everything else. And one of the things we do, and this is our own beliefs, is we bless the equipment with holy water, and we believe that it protects it. So they went off, and then and they came back and says, "Ron, can you bless our batteries, because we can't charge them," because they were European at the time, and so so we had to go do it.
Funny.
So, anyways, Mark, we want to see if you in action. We want to see what a platform medium does, and so we're going to play Cemetery Tripping right now, and then we'll be back with Mark.
All right.
Good, thank you.
Welcome to Cemetery Tripping, where I will feature a different cemetery in each episode that I hope you will seek out and enjoy as much as I do. As an avid taphophile, or lover of tombstones, I spend a lot of time in the local New England area in the beautiful and historic cemeteries we have here. The stones here are like no others, and I have literally thousands of pictures of the intricate and symbolic carvings found on them. You can see my pictures on Facebook by doing a search for Cemetery Tripping. Located on the very edge of Boston Common along Boylston Street, the central burying ground dates from 1756, although the oldest burial actually took place in 1749. It holds not only the usual historic stones of the period, but also some very unusual and interesting carvings. Established to alleviate overcrowding at King's Chapel, Copp's Hill, and Granary burying grounds, this site was considered the least desirable, because it was the farthest from the market center of the town. There were 5,000 burials here, but there are only 487 tombstones and 282 tombs around the structure known as the Dell, which houses the remains of the graves disturbed by street construction. Additionally, a large grave in the northwest part of the site contains human remains unearthed during subway construction in 1895. Some famous names in this graveyard are Gilbert Stuart, the famous artist that painted George Washington, Samuel Sprague, a participant in the Boston Tea Party and soldier in the Revolution, and Charles Sprague, the famous 19th century poet. While the graves of famous people are interesting, I found 3 stones in this cemetery which were more fascinating to me. The first is the gravestone of a slave, and the inscription reads, "Here lies interred the body of Chow Mandarin, a native of China, aged 19 years, whose death was occasioned on the 11th September, 1798, by a fall from the masthead of the ship Mac of Boston. This stone is erected to his memory by his affectionate master, John Boyd, Jr. The second stone which caught my eye is unlike any other marker I have ever seen before, and is filled with symbolism and biblical references. It is the grave of James Waterman of Scituate, aged 18, and is carved with a dead branch broken from a growing tree. A butterfly is emerging from its cocoon on the dead branch. Beside the growing tree rests a Bible opened to the reference of Job XIV 7, XXV 6. A chalice is next to the Bible, and the inscription across the top, Son sat remel vixisse. A rough translation of this Latin phrase is, "Son lived enough," while I interpret the symbolism of the butterfly as a life emerging from the dead, and the branch that has fallen from the tree symbolizes the death of a family member. The biblical references are, "For there is hope of a tree, if it be cut down, that it will sprout again, and that the tender branch thereof will not cease." And the second reference is, "How much less man that is a worm, and the Son of Man, which is a worm." This is an amazing stone, and I wish I knew more about young James Waterman. The third and final stone that I found unusual was that of Frederick Gilbert, because it hosts not only the Masonic symbols of the compass, stars, moon, and square, above a chalice on its tympanum, but also the Puritan symbols of a coffin with skull and crossbones and the sexton's tools of pick and shovel. The inscription at the very top of the stone reads, "He lived within compass," a phrase which I found in a book called The Masonic Review. The full phrase reads, "He lives within compass, he works with his tools, and levels his ways by the Grand Master's rules." For me, it is more about discovering the simple yet beautifully carved and meaningful stones than it is about the grand monuments of the famous. You can find the central burying ground by walking along Boston Common, along Boylston Street from Tremont Street to Charles Street, where you'll see the graveyard just inside the gates. I hope you'll look for my favorite markers and enjoy them as much as I did.
Wow,
And we're back.
that was amazing.
I love that cemetery.
Anyway, so let's go right to
Yes,
it.
we do.
So-
We do. Dive right in.
Mark, you're gonna try to do your mumbo.
I'm going to attempt.
Your attempt,
Yes.
what do they
Indeed.
call it? I don't know what they
Indeed.
call it. Connection. Thank you.
Yeah, demonstrating, it's usually called.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
demonstrating. Yeah.
Somebody's got to save my butt.
Okay. Okay. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here this evening. I'm going to try to get some communication with the next world, as to capitalise on all the training that I've had. Now, this takes three things. This job. Firstly, it requires a rather wonderful spirit person to break across the barrier, which is a miracle in itself, and convey to me information which I do my best to understand. And then it requires from you a careful ear and a wish to receive a message from someone on the other side. So I'm going to try to describe one or two people who I believe are joining us now from the spirit world, and we shall see. Now, I want to start by trying to introduce a lady who I think she has a fairly motherly feel to her. Okay, so I think she might well be a mother, or possibly a grandmother, but I'm going to say a mother. Now, this lady was a natural comic, actually. She made people laugh, and she's a very, as I'm looking at her, she'd probably be about 70 as I'm looking at her. Now, I'm not saying that that's when she passed, but she must have made that sort of age. And I think, well, if you think of a mother, and she has fairly tousled greyish hair, but the thing is that she has skirts on, and I think she very much liked to dance. She very much liked to dance, and I can see her almost jigging around, you see, and she's funny. She liked to keep people happy. So I want to know whether that might correspond to a mother or a grandmother in the family. There's this definite thing about having skirts that move around. Have you got any offers on that? Anyone? Someone, she liked to move a lot. She's humorous and she likes to move, switching her skirts around. Then this would have been a key thing to her, and she kept people amused. So you get no?
No.
Not me.
I wonder.
me.
Huh?
My mother didn't like to move.
No. Well, this has to be someone very. This one has to be someone very active. So I'm seeing her. I just go on a little bit because she was quite strongly here. So I didn't. But she got I think she liked to wear strings of beads like this. And I'm seeing her in a dark dress, which swings around a bit. I don't understand any memories of that from anyone.
Think now.
No? It's a shame, really. There might be something to do with these beads, because I think they might be kept. It might be kept as a sort of
Memento.
a memento. Yeah. Well, Seem. No. I think. Well, she's here anyway, so that's not doing us much good.
That's all right.
That's not really doing us much good, but excuse me. But I just wonder. It was just her comicness, and this obviously doesn't fit anyone's mother or grandmother. I'm a bit surprised. Don't really know where to go for it from there. No. Okay. Well, we'll put her aside, and I'll come back to her if anyone might remember who she is. So, okay. I want to go on now to a chap who is a family man, a very charming old family member, and he feels as if he has got a sort of slightly cuddly feel to him. So I'm thinking he might be a grandfather, but he might be a father. The point about this chap is that I'm seeing him in quite late age, and he has a very domed bald head. And the point about him is that he was very much helped. He was very appreciative of help, and I get an image of his hand being held. There are a number of other features about him, but this has to be a very gentle man who was smallish, I believe, but with a distinctly crowned, domed head. And he would have been a father or a grandfather, and somewhat helpless towards the end. But he again could have a comic turn. So have I got any offers on this chap? No. Oh dear.
I think it could be my brother-in-law.
It could be your brother-in-law, madam. Was he? Do you remember him being very appreciative? And did you hold his hand a lot when
At the end.
when he went? And he had quite a shiny crown like that. And would you remember him being? I mean, he was just a very gentle-centered man, very gentle. And I'm seeing that he must be about 75 or something like that.
He passed young.
How old?
I think like 49.
15, that's a bit old. But he had this bald head, did he? Yeah. Listen, do you remember if he there are two aspects of his appearance which struck me. The first was a sort of raincoat thing. Do you remember him having a certain sort of raincoat that he rather liked to live in?
No.
Because the other thing is that he wore his trousers rather short, too short. Do you remember that?
No. Maybe
I don't think I'm with you then. No. He was. I mean, he was very dependent at the end, and I think we've got that bit. You don't remember the colour of his socks, do you? Because he seems to have coloured socks. Do you remember this? See, that should be something that, if it coming through.
It sounds like the director's grandfather.
Whose grandfather?
The director.
The director's grandfather.
Oh,
Oh, there you are. You're out there, sir, are you? And do you remember him wearing coloured socks? Stripy, almost comic coloured socks. Yeah, with his trousers too high.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's funny.
And do you remember the raincoat as well? Like the rain, you did. Oh, that's good. Yeah, well, he's here now.
He says, "Hey."
So, yeah. So he was what was he, about 75 when he passed? Yeah, he was about 75 when he passed. So, and he's very appreciative, you see. It's almost like, not puppy eyes, but very grateful. A lovely, a very appreciative, lovely man, very gentle. And he was your grandfather, sir, was he? Yeah, he did sound like that. Yeah, okay, good. Okay. Well, look, we haven't got much time, so I'll thank you for... It's really a message of gratitude that he has. That's what it is. And he must have... he must be he's almost crying, you know.
Aw.
And I think he was very weak when he passed, you know, very weak. And maybe his mind or something, I don't know. But he's so grateful now, you see. So you must have been most instrumental in helping him, you know, towards the end. Is that the case? Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. Now,
Do you have a
thank
message
Father,
from
for-
Mark?
Huh?
Is he giving a message?
It's just really a question of appreciation, you see.
Okay.
Because he wasn't the one to intrude. He's almost self-effacing, isn't he? He was a shy man. Yes, very shy man. So he's just coming forward just to say,
Peek out.
yeah.
I'm here.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
So that's what that is. Okay, well, thank you so much for that. You're obviously watching the program as it goes out then, so that's something. Thank you so much.
You know, I was afraid of that
Yeah.
would happen from
Yeah.
the
I know,
control.
be out in the
Yeah.
other
And
room.
when I was thinking about the first one,
Right.
it's like, okay,
Yeah,
so
there could be someone out
Yep.
there. Yeah.
We've got time. I'll do there's a couple more people. Who am I going to pick? Yeah. I could put 2 or 3. So I'm just trying to think who to pick now. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to try a lady. I'm going to try a lady who we've got to get going, haven't we? I'm going to try a lady who I believe passed quite young in life. So we're talking now about someone who was probably about 40 or in their 40s, but young in life, not she went before her time. And the reason I want to mention is that I think 2 things about her. Firstly, I think she may have been racially, I think she might have been Asian. She's got that really lovely thick sort of black hair, and I think she looks fairly Asian. So I can cut this quickly just to see. Do you know of a lady who's racially Asian? She's very friendly woman, and she would have passed, I think, probably quite recently. Does that ring any bells with anyone? She probably had some children. No? You
Yeah.
got?
We have to wrap up.
You don't? Hmm?
Yeah, no, we have to
we
wrap
have to
up.
wrap
We
it
don't.
up,
Okay.
actually.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay. Well,
Tell us,
she's here as well.
we want to thank all the spirits that came through
Yeah,
anyway.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
If we did
Okay.
have more time, we could connect a little bit better on this.
I
But
know.
Mark, we want to thank you so much
Oh,
for
not a
joining
bit.
us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
It was extremely interesting.
Yes, it
and
was.
yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our wonderful studio audience. We don't usually have a large studio audience. We have, sometimes a couple of people, but we have a full house tonight, and we're very grateful for you all to come out and see what's up.
Thank you, audience.
Hey, audience.
Well, I guess it's time to wrap it up.
Yeah, we do need to wrap up.
So, Mark,
So-
thank you once again.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you
If
so
somebody
much.
wanted to get a hold of you, how could they do that?
I have a website.
Mm-hmm.
It's called markbrittle.com.
MarkBrittle.com.
Okay, that's
Okay.
easy to remember. Awesome.
I can remember that, even, maybe.
All right.
Okay. So,
So-
till next time,
Yes.
good night and God bless.
Thanks for tuning in. Take care, and we'll see you next month.
From ghoulies to ghosties, long-leggedy beasties, and things that go bump in the night. Deliver us, good Lord.